author is Gerard, Sunday School Director for New Spirit Baptist Church here in Dallas, Texas, where the Reverend Otis Grimes is pastor. And our Sunday School lesson for today, September the 14th, in the year of our Lord 2025, is Hezekiah's Passover. Hezekiah's Passover. The reference scriptures for this lesson are taken from the book of 2 Chronicles, the 30th chapter, the 1st through the 9th verse, and the 26th through the 27th verse. This is lesson 2 in our lesson series, Judah from Isaiah to the Exile. Our new lesson series, Judah from Isaiah to the Exile. And it's lesson 2 in unit 2 of this lesson series, Isaiah and the renewal of the temple. Unit 2, Isaiah and the renewal of the temple. For those of us who were raised in the church, or I should say who attended Sunday school and worship services since we were little children, a time of absence from Bible study and worship services may have occurred. This can be due to going away to college or going into the armed forces, the Army, Navy, or the Marines, or just moving out of our parents' home. Sometimes when we move out of our parents' home after we graduate high school, and we're no longer encouraged, I'll say, to go to church by our parents, sometimes we start to neglect going to church or worshiping God and studying His Word. Hopefully, though, at some point, we all realize the need to return to studying the Word and to worshiping God. In this lesson, we will study how God's Old Testament covenant people neglected God and how they were motivated to return to the worship of God as required in the law of Moses. Now, reading the scripture from the New International Version of the Bible, 2 Chronicles, the 30th chapter, the 1st through the 9th verse, and the 26th through the 27th verse, is as follows. It's a lot of reading, so I'm going to try to read fast. Hezekiah sent word to all Israel and Judah, and also wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh, inviting them to come to the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem and celebrate the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel. The king and his officials and the whole assembly in Jerusalem decided to celebrate the Passover in the 2nd month. They had not been able to celebrate it at the regular time because not enough priests had consecrated themselves and the people had not assembled in Jerusalem. The plan seemed right both to the king and to the whole assembly. They decided to send a proclamation throughout Israel from Beersheba to Dan, calling the people to come to Jerusalem and celebrate the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel. It had not been celebrated in large numbers to what was written. At the king's command, couriers went throughout Israel and Judah with letters from the king and from his officials, which read, "People of Israel, return to the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, and, or rather, that he may return to you who are left, who have escaped the hand of the kings of Assyria. Do not be like your parents and your fellow Israelites, who were unfaithful to the Lord, the God of their ancestors, so that he made them an object of horror, as you see. Do not be stiff-necked as your ancestors were. Submit to the Lord. Come to his sanctuary, which he has consecrated forever. Serve the Lord your God, so that his fierce anger will turn away from you. If you return to the Lord, then your fellow Israelites and your children will be shown compassion by their captors and will return to his land. For the Lord your God is gracious and compassionate. He will not turn his face from you if you return to him. And then the 26th verse, there was great joy in Jerusalem, for since the days of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, there had been nothing like this in Jerusalem. The priests and the Levites stood to bless the people, and God heard them. From their prayers, or rather for their prayers, reached heaven, his holy dwelling place. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading, the hearing, and the understanding of his holy word. The nation of Israel was united until Solomon's son, Rehoboam, became king. In 931 BC, the kingdom split into the northern kingdom, Israel, and the southern kingdom, Judah. 200 years had passed from that time to the time of our printed text today. Hezekiah was king over Judah, the southern kingdom. He had just purified the temple and restored proper worship of God in the temple. The Passover celebration time was near, and he wanted all the Jews to come to Jerusalem to celebrate according to the law of Moses. Now, in verse 1, we see that Hezekiah sent word and letters to all the towns of Israel and Judah, inviting them to Judah to celebrate the Passover. Ephraim and Manasseh were the two largest tribes in the northern kingdom, and they were specifically called out because they were frequently used to designate the entirety of the kingdom of Israel. And we see examples in Jeremiah, the 7th chapter and the 15th verse, and in Hosea, the 5th chapter and the 1st through the 3rd verse. Now, at that time, it was after the Assyrians had taken most of the people of Israel away captive. That was when Assyria had attacked the northern kingdom, Israel, and they were threatening to attack the southern kingdom, Judah. Now, the northern kingdom of Israel at that time had left off worshiping God in Judah, in the temple, as God intended for his people to do. He had put his name on the temple, on the house of God, which was a temple in Judah, and all worship was supposed to be held there. But the king of the northern kingdom established worship in Israel, so his people wouldn't have to. He didn't want his people to go to Judah in Jerusalem to worship, because he was afraid they would return to worshiping the Lord in the kingdom of Judah instead of Jerusalem. So now that didn't sit well with God, and that's why he allowed the Israelites to attack and take captive the people of Israel. Those who were left in the northern kingdom came to be known as Samaritans, which the Jews hated because they had intermarried with non-Jews in the land. Now, the king and his officials and the whole assembly in Jerusalem decided to celebrate the Passover in the second month. Now, the normal time was during the first month, but they decided to do it in the second month because of the logistics. They had to go through all the towns in Israel to get word out to come to the Passover, and that would take some time. So they decided that they would celebrate it in the second month instead of the regular time. And also, it was because there was not enough priests who had consecrated themselves, and the people had not assembled in Jerusalem. Now, the plan seemed good. It seemed okay to the king and to the whole assembly. So they sent a proclamation throughout Israel from Beersheba to Dan, calling the people to come to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel. Now, it had been celebrated, or it had not been celebrated in such large numbers according to what was written. And this was ever since uh, uh, King Solomon was king over Israel. Now, at the king's command, all these couriers were sent out throughout Israel and Judah, and they had letters from the king. And what the letter said was, "People of Israel, return to the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, that he may return to you who are left, who have escaped from the hand of the kings of Assyria." Now, he says the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. And we know Israel is another name for Jacob. Jacob's name was changed to Israel by God. And then the whole nation of God's Old Testament covenant people became known as Israel. So there may be some confusion when we're talking about the nation of Israel as a whole and Israel, the northern kingdom, when the kingdom was split into two. But anyway, uh, Hezekiah sent word to those who were left in the land of Israel to come and celebrate the Passover. And he said in the letter also for them to not be like their parents, their fellow Israelites, and because they were unfaithful to the Lord, the God of their ancestors. And so that the Lord had made an object of horror as they saw themselves. And by that he means they could see that the Lord had allowed the Assyrians to come and take away their ancestors as captives. And that was because they were so stiff-necked that they had turned from worshiping the Lord. Now, he says in verse 8, the B part of verse 8, he says to submit to the Lord, come to his sanctuary, which has been consecrated forever. Serve the Lord your God, so that his fierce anger will turn away from you. And as I said earlier, the sanctuary was the temple in Jerusalem. That was where all worship of God was supposed to be. This was deemed by God himself. So when Israel set up their own temples and they set up their own gods separate from Israel, then they were turning against God, and that was when their problems started. So he says in verse 9, King Hezekiah said in his letter, it says, "If you return to the Lord, then your fellow Israelites and your children will be shown compassion by their captors, which were the Assyrians." In other words, God would cause the Assyrians to be compassionate to those people he had taken away as captives from the kingdom of Israel. He says also that they would return to this land. If they would return to the Lord, then they would return to the land of Assyria. He said it was for the Lord, their God, was gracious and compassionate, and that he would not turn his face from them if they returned to him. So Hezekiah was doing all he could to get these people that were left in Israel, these Israelites, God's people, who were left in Israel, trying to get them to come to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, which, as we stated earlier, was a celebration that God had deemed should be a lasting celebration. And as we said before, it's still celebrated today. Passover is. Now, when we go on to verse, um, go on to the 30th chapter and the 26th and the 27th verse. This is after all the sacrifices had been made. There were thousands of goats and sheep and lambs were sacrificed as a sin offering. And the Passover lamb had been slaughtered. All the celebration had taken place. The priests and the Levites had taken their place in the celebration with the music, with the instruments of the Lord and all. And in verse 26, it says, there was great joy in Jerusalem. For since the days of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, there had been nothing like this in Jerusalem. So Hezekiah had restored the celebration of Passover, and all the people were all joyous, and they were all celebrating. And then it says here in the last verse of our printed text, verse 27, that the priests and the Levites, they stood and blessed the people. And God heard them he heard their prayers all the way up into heaven, which is his holy dwelling place. Now, in this lesson, it shows us that even if we stop serving the Lord for whatever reason, stop worshiping him, stop studying his word or whatever, and then we come to our senses and we resume our worship of God, studying his word, then we will receive his blessings. I mean, it's kind of a hard thing to expect God to bless us when we don't worship him because of who he is. And we should encourage others who have done the same thing, who have strayed away from worshiping God. And when we do encourage others, we'll be just like Hezekiah, who restored the Passover and the worship of the one true God in Jerusalem. So I guess, so this lesson, Hezekiah's Passover, I hope you've gained at least one thought from this lesson. May God bless you, and may he ever keep you.